Welcome to the Story Lab. I hope you enjoy this story. Let's begin. The Eiffel Tower loomed before us, its iron lattice stretching towards the clear Parisian sky. I turned to Vanessa, expecting to see the same wonder in her eyes that I felt. Instead, I found her gaze distant, unfocused. Quite a sight, isn't it? I said, trying to draw her attention. Vanessa blinked, as if coming out of a trance. Oh yes, it's impressive. I frowned. This wasn't the reaction I'd anticipated when I'd planned our 10th anniversary trip to Europe. Back in Austin, Vanessa had seemed excited about the idea. Now, standing in the heart of Paris, she looked detached. Are you feeling all right? I asked, touching her arm gently. Is it jet lag? She shrugged off my hand. I'm fine, Mark. Just tired, I guess. We continued our walk along the Seine, the river's surface glittering in the afternoon sun. Street vendors called out to passers-by, their voices a melodic backdrop to the city's bustling energy. Remember when we first met? I said, trying to rekindle some of our old spark. You were giving that presentation on Monet in our shared art history class. Vanessa's lips curved into a small smile. You mean the class you only took to fill a humanities requirement for your business degree? I laughed. Hey, it turned out to be the best decision of my life. I met you, didn't I? Her smile faded as quickly as it had appeared. That was a long time ago, Mark. I felt a pang in my chest at her words. 10 years isn't that long. We've built a great life together, haven't we? Vanessa didn't respond, her eyes fixed on a group of artists painting by the riverbank. I followed her gaze, noticing how intently she watched their brush strokes. We could take an art class while we're here if you'd like, I suggested. I know you haven't had much time for painting lately, with work and everything. She turned to me, an unreadable expression on her face. That's thoughtful of you, Mark, but I don't think a single class would make much difference at this point. I furrowed my brow, confused by her response. What do you mean? Vanessa sighed. Nothing. Let's just enjoy the walk, okay? We continued in silence, the gap between us feeling wider than ever. As we passed a quaint cafe, the aroma of fresh coffee and pastries wafted towards us. How about we stop for a croissant? I suggested, hoping to lighten the mood. I hear they're to die for in Paris. Vanessa nodded absently. Sure, why not? We found a small table outside the cafe, ordering coffee and pastries from a cheerful waiter. As we waited for our order, I tried again to engage Vanessa in conversation. So, what would you like to do tomorrow? We could visit the Louvre, or maybe take a day trip to Versailles? Vanessa stirred her coffee slowly, not meeting my eyes. Whatever you want, Mark. You planned this trip, after all. Her words stung. I planned it for us, Vanessa. I wanted it to be special for both of us. She looked up then, her eyes filled with an emotion I couldn't quite place. I know you did. I'm not sure this is what I want anymore. My heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? The trip? Vanessa shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. No, Mark. This us. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady myself. Vanessa, what are you saying? She took a deep breath. I'm saying that I'm not happy, Mark. I haven't been for a while now. I felt as though I'd been punched in the gut. But why didn't you say anything? We could have worked on it, fixed things. Vanessa's laugh was hollow. Fix things? Mark, you can't fix who we are. You're all about structure, plans, building your business. And I want more than that. I want passion, creativity, spontaneity. I struggled to find words, my mind reeling. I can be spontaneous. I can be passionate. Vanessa, please, just tell me what you need. She shook her head, a sad smile on her lips. It's not about what I need, Mark. It's about who I am, who we are. We've grown in different directions, and I don't think we can find our way back. I reached across the table, taking her hand in mine. We can try. Please, Vanessa. 10 years of marriage has to count for something. She gently pulled her hand away. It does count for something, but sometimes that's not enough. We sat in silence for a long moment, the cheerful chatter of nearby patrons a stark contrast to the heavy atmosphere at our table. Finally, Vanessa stood. I need some time alone, she said. I'm going for a walk. I watched her go, feeling helpless and lost. As her figure disappeared into the crowd, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was watching our marriage slip away with her. I paced the length of our hotel room, my eyes darting to the ornate clock on the mantel every few seconds. It had been hours since Vanessa left for her walk, and the Parisian night had long since fallen. "Where are you, Vanessa?" I muttered. I tried calling her cell phone countless times, but it went straight to voicemail. My mind raced with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. Had she been in an accident? Gotten lost in the unfamiliar city? I couldn't shake the memory of our conversation at the cafe. The pain in her eyes, the finality in her voice. No, I told myself. Vanessa wouldn't just leave. We'd been together for 10 years. She wouldn't throw that away without a word. But as I turned to make another circuit of the room, my eye caught on something. Or rather, the absence of something. Vanessa's suitcase was gone. My breath caught in my throat. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." I yanked open the closet door, praying I was mistaken. But the space where her clothes had hung was empty. I rushed to the bathroom, my heart pounding. Her toiletries were gone too. "This can't be happening," I said, my voice echoing in the empty room. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my head in my hands. How had I not seen this coming? The signs had been there all day. Hell, maybe for months. But I'd been too caught up in my own world, too sure of our relationship, to notice. As the initial shock began to fade, my business instincts kicked in. If Vanessa had left, she must have left a trail. I pulled out my laptop, logging into our joint bank account. There it was, a sizable withdrawal made just hours ago. "Okay, Mark," I said to myself. "Think. What's the next step?" I picked up the phone, dialing the front desk. "This is Mark Lawson in room 305. I need to speak with your security team immediately." 20 minutes later, I was in the hotel security office, watching grainy footage of Vanessa leaving the hotel with her suitcase. The timestamp matched the bank withdrawal. "Can you follow her?" I asked the security guard. "See where she went?" He shook his head. "I'm sorry, monsieur. Our cameras only cover the hotel premises." I nodded, my mind already moving to the next possibility. "What about nearby businesses? Traffic cameras?" The guard looked uncomfortable. "That would require police involvement, monsieur. Is your wife in danger?" I hesitated. Was she? Or was I the one in danger of losing her forever? "No," I said finally. "No, she's not in danger. Thank you for your help." Back in the room, I pored over our credit card statements. There had to be something, some clue as to where she'd gone. And then I saw it. A charge at a cafe in Montmartre, made just an hour ago. Without a second thought, I grabbed my jacket and rushed out of the room. The night concierge looked up in surprise as I burst through the lobby. "Taxi!" I called out, my voice urgent. "To Montmartre, quickly." The ride seemed to take forever, the streets of Paris a blur outside the window. My mind raced with what I'd say when I found Vanessa, how I'd convince her to come back, to give us another chance. Finally, the taxi pulled up in front of the cafe. I threw some euros at the driver and jumped out, my eyes scanning the area frantically. And then I saw her. Vanessa was sitting at an outdoor table, her head thrown back in laughter. Across from her was a man I'd never seen before, his hand resting casually on hers. The sight felt like a physical blow. I stood there, frozen, as I watched my wife of 10 years, the woman I'd built my life around, looking happier than I'd seen her in months, with another man. The man leaned in, saying something I couldn't hear, and Vanessa nodded, her eyes shining. He stood, offering her his hand, which she took without hesitation. As they turned to leave, Vanessa's eyes met mine. For a moment, the world stood still. I saw shock in her eyes, then guilt, and finally, relief. The man, noticing her distraction, followed her gaze. His eyes widened as he saw me, and he stepped slightly in front of Vanessa, as if to protect her. From me, her husband. I took a step forward, my voice hoarse. "Vanessa?" She straightened her shoulders, her grip tightening on the man's hand. "Mark," she said, her voice steady. I didn't expect to see you here. I laughed bitterly. Clearly not. Were you planning on telling me, or just disappearing into the night? The man beside her shifted uncomfortably. Perhaps we should take this somewhere more private? I turned to him, anger flaring. And who exactly are you? Vanessa intervened. Mark, this is Philippe. Philippe Rousseau. He's a friend. A friend, I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. Is that what we're calling it? Philippe stepped forward, his voice calm. Monsieur Lawson, I understand this is a difficult situation. I cut him off. You understand nothing. This is my wife you're with. My marriage you're destroying. Vanessa flinched at my words. Mark, please. It's not like that. Philippe and we connected. In a way I haven't felt in years. Her words cut deep. And what about our connection, Vanessa? 10 years of marriage, just thrown away for some fling with a stranger? Philippe bristled. I assure you, monsieur, this is no fling. Vanessa and I have a deep understanding. I laughed harshly. A deep understanding? You've known her for what, a day? I've known her for over a decade. I know everything about her. Vanessa shook her head, her eyes sad. That's just it, Mark. You think you know me, but you don't. Not anymore. I've changed, and you're still the same man I married. Focused on your business, on building our life. But I need more than that now. I felt as though the ground was crumbling beneath my feet. More? Vanessa, I gave you everything. We built a life together. How can you just walk away from that? She sighed, her voice soft. Because sometimes, Mark, a comfortable life isn't enough. I need passion, creativity. I need to feel alive again. Philippe wrapped an arm around her waist, and I had to resist the urge to punch him. Vanessa has a fire in her soul, monsieur. A passion for art and life that needs to be nurtured, not stifled. I turned to Vanessa, desperation in my voice. I can nurture that. We can take our classes together, travel more. Anything you want, Vanessa. Just don't do this. Don't throw away everything we have. For a moment, I saw hesitation in her eyes. But then she looked at Philippe, and it vanished. I'm sorry, Mark, but my mind is made up. I'm staying in Paris, with Philippe. The finality in her voice hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled back, my world spinning. You can't be serious. Vanessa, please. Think about what you're doing. She shook her head. I have thought about it, Mark. For longer than you know. This isn't a rash decision. It's what I need to do for myself. I looked between them, this stranger and the woman I thought I knew better than anyone. So that's it? 10 years of marriage, ended on a street in Paris? Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, Mark. I truly am. But yes, this is the end. I stood there, watching as Vanessa and Philippe turned and walked away, disappearing into the Parisian night. The woman I loved, the life I thought we had, vanishing with them. As I stood alone on that cobblestone street, the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. My marriage was over. My wife had left me for another man, and I was alone in a foreign city, with nothing but the shattered remains of the life I thought I knew. The next few days passed in a blur. I wandered the streets of Paris in a daze, alternating between numbness and crushing pain. Every happy couple I saw felt like a mockery of what I'd lost. Every beautiful sight reminded me of the plans Vanessa and I had made, now turned to ash. I found myself back at the cafe where I'd confronted Vanessa and Philippe. It was quieter now, the morning crowd sipping their coffees and reading newspapers. I sat at a table, staring into a cup of coffee I couldn't bring myself to drink. Excuse me, a voice said, pulling me from my thoughts. Are you all right, monsieur? I looked up to see an older man standing by my table, concern etched on his weathered face. I'm fine, I said automatically, then sighed. Actually, no, I'm not fine at all. The man sat down across from me, his eyes kind. Perhaps talking about it would help? Sometimes, a stranger's ear is the best listener. I don't know why, but something in his manner made me want to open up. My wife left me, I said, the word still bitter on my tongue. For another man. A local artist named Philippe Rousseau. The man's eyebrows shot up. Philippe Rousseau? You're certain? I nodded, surprised by his reaction. Yes, that's his name. Do you know him? The man leaned back, a troubled look on his face. I used to. We were friends, many years ago. But Philippe, he is not the man he appears to be. My interest piqued. What do you mean? He sighed heavily. Philippe has always been charming, especially with women. But behind that charm lies a man deeply in debt and involved with some very dangerous people. I felt a chill run down my spine. Dangerous how? The man looked around, as if checking to see if anyone was listening. Philippe got mixed up with some loan sharks a few years back. He needed money to fund his artistic lifestyle. But when he couldn't pay, things got ugly. Did he get out of it? I asked, my concern for Vanessa overriding my anger for a moment. He shook his head. As far as I know, he's still in deep. That's why I ended our friendship. I couldn't stand by and watch him drag others down with him. I sat back, my mind reeling. Vanessa had no idea what she'd gotten herself into. Despite everything, I couldn't bear the thought of her being in danger. I have to warn her, I said, half to myself. The man reached out, placing a hand on my arm. Be careful, monsieur. Philippe can be unpredictable when cornered, and the people he's involved with are not to be trifled with. I nodded, grateful for his warning. Thank you for telling me this. I'm Mark, by the way. Jean, he replied, offering his hand. I hope this information helps you, Mark. Be careful how you proceed. I shook his hand, my mind already racing with the implications of what he'd told me. I will, Jean. Thank you again. As Jean walked away, I sat there, trying to process everything. Vanessa had left me for a man who was not only in debt, but potentially dangerous. I needed to warn her, but would she even listen? I pulled out my phone, staring at Vanessa's number. My thumb hovered over the call button, but I hesitated. What would I say? How could I make her believe me? In the end, I decided against calling. If Philippe was as dangerous as Jean suggested, I couldn't risk tipping him off. I needed a plan, a way to protect Vanessa and myself. As I left the cafe, my resolve strengthened. It was time to go home, to regroup and figure out my next move. Vanessa might have left me, but I wasn't about to let her walk into danger blindly. The familiar Austin skyline greeted me as my plane touched down. After the whirlwind in Paris, the sight of home should have been comforting. Instead, it felt hollow, a reminder of the life I'd lost. I barely unpacked before making my first call. The phone rang twice before a crisp voice answered. Samantha Blake's office. This is Mark Lawson. I need to speak with Samantha urgently. One moment, please. As I waited, I paced my living room, my eyes falling on the photos of Vanessa and me. Happy, smiling, oblivious to what was coming. I turned them face down, unable to bear their accusatory stares. Mark. Samantha's voice cut through my thoughts. What can I do for you? I need your help, Sam. It's about Vanessa. What's happened? I took a deep breath. She's left me. For another man. In Paris. There was a pause. I see. And you want to file for divorce? Yes. On grounds of adultery. All right. Come to my office tomorrow morning. We'll discuss the details and start preparing your case. The next morning, I found myself in Samantha's sleek downtown office. She listened intently as I recounted the events in Paris. So, this Philippe character, she said, leaning forward. You believe he's involved in some shady dealings? I nodded. That's what I was told, but I don't have any concrete evidence. Samantha tapped her pen against her desk. We'll need to tread carefully here, Mark. Accusations without proof can backfire. What do you suggest? First, we focus on the adultery. That's clear-cut. Texas is a fault divorce state, which works in our favor. I leaned back in my chair. And what does that mean for me? For Vanessa? Samantha's eyes gleamed. It means we can push for a settlement heavily in your favor. If we play this right, Vanessa could walk away with nothing. The thought should have pleased me, but instead, it left a bitter taste in my mouth. Is that really necessary? Mark, Samantha said, her voice softening slightly. I know this is hard, but Vanessa made her choice. She betrayed your marriage. Now it's time to protect yourself. I nodded slowly. You're right. What do we do first? We gather evidence. Credit card statements, hotel records, Anything that proves Vanessa's infidelity. Then we file the divorce petition. And Vanessa? When does she find out? Samantha smiled, a predatory glint in her eye. When we serve her the papers. And trust me, she won't know what hit her. As I left Samantha's office, my phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. We need to talk. I'm coming back to Austin. I stared at the message, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. Part of me wanted to warn her, to protect her from Philippe. But another part, a darker part, wanted her to feel the pain she'd caused me. I typed out a reply, yes, we do. Let me know when you're here. As I hit send, I realized I was at a crossroads. The path I chose now would determine not just the outcome of my divorce, but the kind of man I would become. I called Samantha back. How quickly can we file those papers? Her voice was cool, efficient. I can have them ready by tomorrow. Why? Vanessa's coming back to Austin. I want them waiting for her when she arrives. There was a pause, then Samantha chuckled. I like your style, Mark. Consider it done. As I hung up, I felt a sense of grim satisfaction. Vanessa had made her choice. Now it was time for her to face the consequences. The next morning, I woke with a sense of purpose. If Vanessa thought she could just waltz back into town and smooth things over, she had another thing coming. But first, I had some digging to do. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Jake Morrison Investigations. How can I help you? Jake, it's Mark Lawson. I've got a job for you. There was a pause. Mark? It's been a while. What's the situation? I filled Jake in on the basics, leaving out the more personal details. I need you to look into a guy named Philippe Rousseau. He's an artist in Paris. I have reason to believe he's involved in some shady business. All right, Jake said, his voice taking on a professional tone. What exactly are you looking for? Everything. His financials, his connections, his art dealings. If he's got skeletons in his closet, I want to know about them. This sounds personal, Mark. You sure you want to go down this road? I gritted my teeth. Just do the job, Jake. How soon can you get me something? Give me a couple of days. I'll see what I can dig up. After hanging up, I turned my attention to my own finances. If Vanessa thought she was getting her hands on my hard-earned money, she had another thing coming. I spent the next few hours transferring funds, adjusting investments, and securing my assets. By the time I was done, Vanessa would be lucky to get a dime. Just as I finished, my phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. I'm at the house. We need to talk. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation. As I drove home, I rehearsed what I would say, how I would remain calm and collected. But all my preparations went out the window when I saw her standing in our living room. She looked tired, her usual polished appearance slightly frayed at the edges. Mark, she said, her voice soft. I'm so sorry. I felt a surge of anger. Sorry? You're sorry? You leave me in Paris, run off with some artist, and all you can say is sorry? Vanessa flinched. I know I hurt you. I never meant for things to happen this way. I laughed bitterly. How did you mean for them to happen, Vanessa? Did you think I'd just accept it and move on? No, I don't know what I thought. It all happened so fast. I shook my head. Fast? You've been unhappy for months, maybe years. You just never had the guts to tell me. Tears welled up in her eyes. That's not fair, Mark. I tried to tell you, but you never listened. You were always so focused on your business, on building our life. You never saw that I was drowning. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Had I really been that blind? And Philippe? He saw all that in what, a day? Vanessa looked away. Philippe understands me in a way you never did. He sees the artist in me, the part of me that's been suffocating all these years. I felt my anger rising again. And does he see the part of you that's about to lose everything? Because that's what's happening, Vanessa. I've filed for divorce. Her head snapped up, shock written across her face. Divorce? Mark, please, can't we talk about this? I pulled the papers from my jacket and tossed them on the coffee table. There's nothing to talk about. You made your choice. Now you have to live with it. Vanessa picked up the papers with trembling hands. Mark, please. We can work this out. I made a mistake. For a moment, I almost wavered. But then I remembered her in Philippe's arms, laughing and happy in a way she hadn't been with me in years. No, Vanessa, we can't. It's over. As I turned to leave, Vanessa called out, her voice desperate. What about our life together? Our home? Our savings? I paused at the door, looking back at her. You should have thought about that before you threw it all away. With that, I walked out, leaving Vanessa alone with the shattered remains of our marriage. As I drove away, my phone buzzed. It was Jake. Mark, you're going to want to hear this. I found something on Philippe. It's big. I felt a grim smile spread across my face. Tell me everything. Jake's voice crackled over the speakerphone as I sat in my home office, the curtains drawn against the bright Austin sun. This Philippe guy? He's neck-deep in trouble, Mark. We're talking massive debts, connections to some seriously shady characters in the Paris underworld. I leaned forward, my interest piqued. Go on. He's been using his art as a front for money laundering, selling forgeries, inflating prices. The works. But lately, he's fallen behind on payments to some very dangerous people. I felt a chill run down my spine. And Vanessa? Is she involved? Jake paused. No evidence of that. Looks like she might be an unwitting pawn in his game. I ran a hand through my hair, conflicting emotions warring inside me. On one hand, I was relieved Vanessa wasn't knowingly involved in anything illegal. On the other, the thought of her being used by Philippe made my blood boil. What are my options here, Jake? Legally, we could tip off the authorities, both here and in France. But Mark, be careful. These aren't people you want to mess with lightly. I nodded, even though Jake couldn't see me. Thanks, Jake. Send me everything you've got. After hanging up, I sat in silence, weighing my next move. The rational part of me knew I should stay out of it. Let the authorities handle Philippe. But another part, a darker part, wanted to be the one to bring him down. My phone buzzed, interrupting my thoughts. A text from Vanessa. Can we meet? Please. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the reply button. Finally, I typed, my office. 3 p.m. The hours crawled by as I prepared for the confrontation. When Vanessa walked in, she looked like a shadow of her former self, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy. Mark, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Thank you for seeing me. I gestured to the chair across from me. Sit down, Vanessa. We need to talk. She sank into the chair, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. I know I've hurt you, Mark, but please, can't we work this out? 10 years of marriage has to count for something. I leaned back, studying her. It counted for something, Vanessa, right up until you threw it away for a man you barely know. She flinched at my words. It wasn't like that. Philippe and we connected on a level I haven't felt in years. And did you connect with his criminal activities too? I asked, my voice cold. Vanessa's head snapped up, shock written across her face. What are you talking about? I pushed a folder across the desk. Take a look. Your precious Philippe isn't the romantic artist you think he is. With trembling hands, Vanessa opened the folder. I watched as the color drained from her face as she read Jake's report. This can't be true, she whispered. It is, I said. Philippe's been using you, Vanessa. You're just another pawn in his game. Tears welled up in her eyes. No, you're wrong. Philippe loves me. He wouldn't. I cut her off. Wake up, Vanessa. He's a con artist, a criminal, and you've walked right into his trap. Vanessa shook her head, denial written across her face. You're just saying this to hurt me, to get back at me for leaving. I leaned forward, my voice low and intense. I'm saying this to open your eyes. You want to throw away our marriage for this man? Fine, but don't come crying to me when it all falls apart. She stood up, her legs shaky. I don't believe you. Philippe would never. Never what? I interrupted. Never lie to you? Never use you? Wake up, Vanessa. He's already done all of that and more. Vanessa stared at me, a mix of anger and confusion in her eyes. Why are you doing this, Mark? If you want a divorce, fine. But why try to destroy Philippe too? I stood up, walking around the desk to face her. Because despite everything, I still care about you, Vanessa. And I won't stand by and watch you ruin your life for a lie. For a moment, I saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes. But then she straightened her shoulders, her jaw set. "You're wrong about him, Mark, and I'll prove it." As she turned to leave, I called out, "Be careful, Vanessa. You're playing with fire, and you're going to get burned." She paused at the door, looking back at me. "You don't know Philippe like I do. He's not what you think." With that, she was gone, leaving me alone with the weight of what I'd done. I sank back into my chair, wondering if I'd made the right choice. Had I pushed Vanessa further into Philippe's arms? Or had I planted the seed of doubt that would eventually save her? As I sat there, staring at the door Vanessa had just walked through, I realized that this was far from over. The real battle was just beginning, and I had to be ready for whatever came next. The courtroom buzzed with tension as I took my seat beside Samantha Blake. Across the aisle, Vanessa sat with her lawyer, her eyes fixed on the floor. The judge entered, and we all rose. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Thompson," the bailiff announced. As we settled back into our seats, Samantha leaned over to me. "Remember, let me do the talking. We've got this in the bag." I nodded, my jaw clenched. This was it, the moment of truth. Judge Thompson peered over his glasses at us. "We're here today for the divorce proceedings of Mark and Vanessa Lawson. Ms. Blake, you may begin." Samantha stood, her posture radiating confidence. "Your Honor, we have irrefutable evidence of Mrs. Lawson's infidelity during the couple's anniversary trip to Paris." She proceeded to lay out our case, presenting credit card statements, hotel records, and even photos of Vanessa with Philippe. I watched as Vanessa's face grew paler with each piece of evidence. Furthermore, Samantha continued, "We have uncovered Mr. Rousseau's criminal connections and fraudulent activities." Vanessa's lawyer jumped to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. Mr. Rousseau isn't on trial here." "Overruled," Judge Thompson said. "But tread carefully, Ms. Blake." Samantha nodded. "Your Honor, we believe it's crucial to understand the full context of Mrs. Lawson's actions. She didn't just have an affair. She left her husband for a known criminal." I glanced at Vanessa. She was staring at Samantha, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Mrs. Lawson," the judge addressed her directly, "do you have anything to say in your defense?" Vanessa stood shakily. "Your Honor, I didn't know about Philippe's activities. I made a mistake, but I shouldn't lose everything because of it." "A mistake?" I couldn't help but interject. "You threw away 10 years of marriage for a con artist." "Mr. Lawson," the judge warned, "please refrain from speaking out of turn." Samantha quickly took control. "Your Honor, given Mrs. Lawson's admission of infidelity and her poor judgment, we ask that Mr. Lawson be awarded the majority of their shared assets. Furthermore, we request that no alimony be granted to Mrs. Lawson." Vanessa's lawyer protested, but I could see the resignation in his eyes. He knew we had one. After what felt like hours of back and forth, Judge Thompson cleared his throat. "Having reviewed all the evidence and heard both sides, I'm ready to make my ruling." The courtroom fell silent. I held my breath. "In the matter of Lawson versus Lawson, I find in favor of the plaintiff, Mr. Mark Lawson. Mrs. Lawson's infidelity and association with a known criminal cannot be overlooked. Mr. Lawson is awarded 80% of the shared assets. No alimony will be granted to Mrs. Lawson." I exhaled slowly, a mix of relief and sadness washing over me. It was over. I'd won. As the judge dismissed us, I turned to look at Vanessa. She sat there, shell-shocked, her dreams of a bohemian life with Philippe crumbling around her. "Mark," she called out as I stood to leave. "Please, can we talk?" I paused, considering. Then I shook my head. "There's nothing left to say, Vanessa. It's done." As I walked out of the courtroom, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, but the hollow feeling in my chest remained. I'd won the battle, but at what cost? A week after the divorce settlement, I received an urgent call from Jake. "Mark, we've got movement on Philippe," he said, his voice tight with excitement. I sat up straighter in my office chair. "What's happening?" "He's trying to flee Paris. My contact at Charles de Gaulle Airport just spotted him trying to board a flight to Buenos Aires." My heart raced. This was it, the final piece of the puzzle. "Can we stop him?" "Already on it," Jake replied. "I've tipped off the French authorities. They're moving in now." I paced my office, waiting for news. An hour later, My phone buzzed. A text from Jake. They got him. Philippe's in custody. Relief flooded through me. It was over. Philippe's web of lies and deceit had finally caught up with him. Later that evening, as I nursed a glass of scotch, my phone rang. Vanessa's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated before answering. Hello? Mark. Vanessa's voice was shaky. Have you heard about Philippe? I sighed. Yes, I have. Did you? Did you have something to do with this? I paused, weighing my words carefully. I made sure the right people knew about his activities, Vanessa. The rest was all him. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I can't believe I was so blind. You tried to warn me, and I wouldn't listen. Vanessa, I said, my voice softening despite myself. What's done is done. Philippe made his choices, and so did you. I know, she whispered. I don't know what to do now. Everything's fallen apart. I felt a pang of sympathy, quickly followed by a surge of anger. You should have thought about that before you threw away our marriage. Mark, please, she pleaded. I made a terrible mistake. Isn't there any way we can? I cut her off. No, Vanessa, there isn't. You made your choice. Now you have to live with it. As I hung up, I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to help her, to ease her pain. But another part, the part that still ached from her betrayal, knew that this was how it had to be. I poured myself another drink, wondering if the hollow feeling in my chest would ever go away. The art world was abuzz with scandal. Anonymous tips had led to the discovery of Philippe's most closely guarded secret, his use of forgeries to sell fake masterpieces. The revelation sent shockwaves through galleries and auction houses across Europe. I sat in my office, reading the latest news articles about Philippe's downfall. His career was in tatters, his reputation destroyed. It should have felt like victory, but instead, I just felt empty. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. Come in, I called out. Samantha Blake entered, a file tucked under her arm. Mark, we need to talk. I gestured for her to sit. What's up, Sam? She perched on the edge of the chair, her usual confidence seeming slightly shaken. I've just received some interesting information about the leak regarding Philippe's forgeries. I kept my face neutral. Oh. Samantha fixed me with a hard stare. It was you, wasn't it? You leaked the information. I met her gaze steadily. What makes you say that? Come on, Mark. I know you. This has your fingerprints all over it. I leaned back in my chair, considering my words carefully. Let's say, hypothetically, it was me. Would that be a problem? Samantha sighed. Legally? No. You didn't do anything wrong. But Mark, when does this end? When is enough enough? I stood up, walking to the window. The Austin skyline stretched out before me, a testament to the life I'd built, the life Vanessa had walked away from. It ends now, I said quietly. This was the final piece. Philippe's lost everything. His freedom, his reputation, his career. And Vanessa? Samantha asked. I turned back to face her. Vanessa made her choice. She has to live with the consequences. Samantha stood, gathering her things. Just be careful, Mark. Revenge can consume you if you let it. As she left, I pondered her words. Had I let my desire for revenge consume me? Or had I simply ensured that justice was served? My phone buzzed. Another text from Vanessa. Can we meet? Please. One last time. I stared at the message for a long moment before replying, Cafe on 6th, 30 minutes. The cafe was quiet when I arrived. Vanessa was already there, sitting at a corner table, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug. Mark, she said as I sat down. Thank you for coming. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, she began, her voice trembling slightly. But I don't know where else to turn. I've lost everything. My reputation, my savings, everything. I felt a flicker of pity, quickly extinguished by the memory of her betrayal. What do you want from me, Vanessa? She looked up, her eyes brimming with tears. A second chance. Please, Mark. I know I made a terrible mistake. But, stop, I said, my voice firm. Just stop, Vanessa. There are no second chances here. You didn't just make a mistake. You chose to throw away our marriage for a fantasy. I know, she whispered, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But Mark, please, can't you find it in your heart to forgive me? I stood up, looking down at her. In that moment, I saw not the woman who had betrayed me, but the girl I had fallen in love with all those years ago. For a brief second, I wavered. But then I remembered the pain, the betrayal, the nights spent wondering what I had done wrong. I remembered the look in her eyes when she chose Philippe over me. I'm sorry, Vanessa, I said, my voice steady. But some things can't be forgiven. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. As I turned to leave, she called out one last time. Mark, I still love you. I paused at the door, not looking back. Goodbye, Vanessa. Walking out of that cafe, I felt a chapter of my life closing behind me. The anger, the hurt, the desire for revenge. It all seemed to fade with each step I took. As I drove home, I realized that Samantha had been right. Revenge could consume you if you let it. But I had chosen to walk away, to maintain my dignity and my strength. The sun was setting as I reached my house, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. I stood in my driveway for a moment, watching as the day faded into night. Tomorrow would be a new day, a fresh start, and for the first time in months, I felt ready to face it. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.